Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Meet Zinnia.
You are being very polite to someone who is attempting to kill us.
Her wife, Saffron.
You know I'm wildly, madly in love with you.
And their best friend, Goldie.
Glad we didn't miss all the fun.
Swords in hand, they defend their city from the worst of humanity.
I am Lord Buxton Blue.
Equity Electric.
Herr Haig. Virgil Walcott. Vicious Suave.
Follow their adventures on the Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society audio drama podcast. Available now at truestory.fm/swashbuckling.
What's up, most excellent friends?
It's Chrissy and Nathan from the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast.
It's a podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian
And their most excellent guests
adventure their way through the 80s movies we think we love
or might have missed
with our grown-up eyes to see how they hold up.
Join us for delightful discussion,
Rollicking recaps.
ratings, and deep-cut recommendations.
Plus, members get some extra fun chit-chat with the hosts after the show.
Download the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast today at truestory.fm.
Or find it wherever the finest podcasts are stored.
And do remember to keep the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast motto in mind.
Be excellent to each other and...
Party on.
Party on, dudes.
Hooked on you, baby, you're golden. Time moves, I never noticed. Just can't get enough. Got me wonderstruck.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Make Me a Nerd. I'm Mandy Kaplan, a mainstream mom whose mission it is to explore all things nerd culture that I've been missing out on and a little afraid of my whole life. I have been diving into all of this with some incredible guests, and this guest, talk about time travel, I've known this guest since I was 10 or 11 years old. He is a writer, producer, and an award-winning director of the feature film Encounter and many other projects, and many other endeavors, cool things like special effects and makeup, and I think we can brush all of that aside and spend an hour talking about his performance as Fagin in the Chapel Hill Chauncey Hall Summer Theater production of Oliver. Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so you're breaking this song?
It's Paul Salamoff.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mandy. It's really...
Hello, old friend.
I know, right? Crazy.
Did you really think we were going to go the whole time and I wasn't going to talk about Fagin?
No, but you know what? I those were the days. I really enjoyed, I really enjoyed doing it because did Fagin and Oliver, and I was also Danny Zuko in my high school production of Grease.
All with a mullet?
Yeah, all with a mullet.
You had a mullet.
Right.
This is not an accusation. That is just a fact.
No. I was a metalhead growing up, so I had to, I had to have that. That was important.
Yes. So I know you as a theater nerd. That's how you and I met. Like I said, all those years ago. You're also a fellow masshole. Shout out Yankees suck. But were you always into science fiction and all of this stuff, nerd culture?
What I think it's funny that you just made that comment about the Yankees because so where I grew up, Natick, Massachusetts, it's one of the biggest sports communities in New England.
It is. Doug Flutie.
Yeah, Doug Flutie, Heisman Trophy winner, came, from my high school. Now, here's the funny thing. I was the farthest thing from being into sports. I really was, a movie geek from when I saw Star Wars at 5 years old. Like in its original run in a Cape Cod drive-in. It was a double feature with Logan's Run, which, spoiler alert, I would go on to write the comic book series for Logan's Run. I was hardcore into sci-fi and then horror and fantasy growing up. Like sports was never a thing for me. And it was really, I knew I would escape one day and make it out to California and where people would understand my obsessions.
And here we are. Incredible. Yeah. So did you see Blade Runner as a kid? Like when it came out in the theaters? 1982, was that it?
Yeah, no, I didn't see it in the theater because I would have been, I probably would have been like 10 or 11 when Blade Runner came out in 82. I didn't see it till the first time, like, on video.
Oh,
But
thank you.
yeah,
I was watching this worried for your child heart. Just like, oh God, I hope his parents didn't take him to this when he was 10 years old.
yeah, but you know what's so funny saying that is that I remember my babysitter showing me The Exorcist when I was something like, I don't know, 8 years old or something like
Yeah, but
that.
that's a classic, Paul.
I guess you're right. I stand corrected. Um, Blade Runner was something, I sort of discovered just because I was so into science fiction. I obviously started out with Star Wars and Star Trek, watching Star Trek, on TV, and I was a big Twilight Zone fan, and then Doctor Who. It was like, for me, it was Doctor Who, which I don't know if you want me to tell your listeners,
Who's
but
your favorite doctor?
well, my favorite Doctor is Tom Baker's the Fourth Doctor, but
The
I have
original, like from the old timey, like I only saw the new ones.
okay. Well, Doctor Who's been around for you don't want to go
I
on a tangent
know.
on Doctor Who because Doctor Who's been around for over 60 years. It started, right after the assassination of President Kennedy. It was 2 days after that the first An Unearthly Child aired. But I have the distinction of owning one of the only existing TARDIS consoles from
Right.
the Eighth Doctor. I own the Paul McGann / Sylvester McCoy TV movie TARDIS console. It's the only one in the United States. It's one of the only existing TARDIS consoles from the classic series, and sort of known in the Doctor Who community for that. And
So cool.
conventions.
Well,
I
I apologize because when I
said,
said, "Do you want to come on the podcast?" You said, "Sure," and I said, "Here are some things I've done, Doctor Who," and
Yeah.
you went womp womp. So
wow, wow.
I know you thought of that, but
So I was really steeped in science fiction from a very young age,
okay.
and so it was inevitable, that I would, stumble across Blade Runner at some point.
Do you
And
remember when it was Betamax or
well,
VHS or
I never had beta. We never had beta. We started with VHS. As a matter of fact, you know what's really funny? The first two VHS that I ever saw, we rented for my birthday. We actually rented the actual player, and the two movies that we rented to show at like my birthday party
uh-huh.
was Dragon Slayer and Alien. And
I
those
don't
are
know
the
Dragon Slayer, but I do know Alien.
oh my goodness. No, you gotta watch Dragon Slayer. It's still actually one of the first times Go Motion, which was a special effects, like it wasn't just stop motion animation, it was called Go Motion, which is how they did the dragons. And
Oh,
the animation on them really holds up really well. Um but
look at
yeah,
you
so
trying to angle for a return visit. Let's see how it goes. We've been doing this 6 minutes, Paul. This could go south.
yeah. I'll rein this in. But
Simmer down.
simmer down now. But inevitably I was going to fight because I'm a big robot fan. Also, like it's one
Mhm.
of the I actually have behind me on a shelf behind me is my little like shelf of robots, and it's like stuff from I'm looking behind me right now. I got like Vincent from The Black Hole. I've got Ray Dean as the Shogun Warrior. I've got Robbie the Robot, and I've got a Dalek, and I've got stuff from Star Blazers and Tweaky from
All words I don't know,
Upper About Shirt. So
but
um
Rogers I've heard of.
yeah, so I'm a big robot fan, but as the robots in Blade Runner is a whole different level. They're actually called
Quite
replicants. Yeah,
quite human
yeah,
with
more
emotions
human,
and
more
yeah.
human than human, more human than human.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, so for me, in regards to Blade Runner, it was you know it's such a different type of movie.
Mhm.
Like it's really a movie about ideas and themes of humanity. And I think I was just originally so taken by it. And I saw the theatrical version first, on home video, of course,
Mhm.
but it was the theatrical version, that I saw first.
Well,
And yeah,
we'll get into you instructed me to watch the director's cut or the final cut.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we will get into the differences because I would have no idea about those differences. Um, so if anyone doesn't know what Blade Runner is about, because some of my listeners are just nerd curious like myself, I didn't do the Wikipedia thing. I'm going to elevator pitch it.
Okay.
Here I go.
Sure.
It's the year is Los Angeles, 2019.
The far
And
future.
right. I mean, now it's our past, which is crazy. And there has been a new race of robots created called replicants, and they're in outer space, but 5 of them return to Earth, and Harrison Ford, Deckard, Agent Deckard, is the Blade Runner, and he has to track them down and kill them.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, that's a pretty decent. Whatever discussion of what it is. The reason why they're not on Earth is they've been banned from Earth. That's why they're in space. They've been treated like a second-class citizen. It was because they were so human. We're up to the Nexus 6s and stuff like that. So these versions of these robots, are almost indistinguishable from human beings.
Humans, right?
Yeah. So
much
so they're
like AI.
Yeah, and they're literally banned from being on Earth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the movie starts with a scroll like Star Wars, with that information for me. And then we get shots of this dystopian Los Angeles with millions of lights and flying cars and fire. And it looks so vivid. The art direction is so incredible. It's totally overwhelming because it's a world that is completely unfamiliar. And then they just start with a scene between what I thought was a prisoner coming in to be interviewed, but maybe he's not a prisoner. But then they just drill into an office and the guy's like, have a seat. I'm going to administer a test. And I thought that was so smart because that's very familiar. We've all been in an office. We've all sat across a desk from somebody and been asked questions. So it humanized what was a daunting opening shot of Los Angeles on fire. And then it was familiar, which I liked. The guy being interviewed is Leon. He's a replicant. He shot the guy.
Everyone.
He shot the guy. I was so shocked. It was such a gripping way to kick off this movie. So, well done. This is Ridley Scott?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well done,
Yeah.
Ridley Scott. I know he's been seeking my approval. And then we pull back out. We see a lot of what the world is now.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately wrote, am I crazy or does the Lego movie borrow heavily from this movie? Have you seen the Lego movie?
Yeah, you know what's really funny is I was playing the Lego movie Xbox game last night.
Oh, you were?
We randomly, because I got it for I don't know, I got it. I love going to yard sales on Saturdays. I got it for like $2 at a yard sale. The Lego Xbox game. I was playing it last night. No joke.
I'm a huge fan of the Lego movie.
Oh, great.
And the way they disseminate information in both cities is the same. There's like a large screen flying overhead, like the weather today will be this. Please remember, And I was like, that's Lord Business from the Lego movie. So I'm just saying, borrowed heavily.
Very funny. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not going to dispute that.
Thank you. No, yeah, one of the rules of podcasts, I'm always right.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Blade Runner is extremely influential. I mean, look, just from a production design and just, design sense, just a vastly influential film on the look of science fiction. Alien and both Blade Runner.
Now, this was in between Alien and Aliens, right? Time, like chronologically release wise.
Yeah.
Alien
because Aliens didn't come out till 87. So, or 86. Sorry, 86. So, and Alien had come out in 79. So.
Okay, so then we meet Harrison Ford.
Yes.
And what's his first name? His last name is Deckard.
Yeah, Rick Deckard.
Rick Deckard. That's a lot of K's. And he's eating noodles, and then he gets arrested by Edward James Olmos in a weird ethnic blend of Asian and Hispanic, and it's awkward. But he arrests him essentially and says, you got to come see the police chief. And the next shot, Harrison Ford is like eating his noodles riding shotgun, eating his noodles, which I thought was hilarious and adorable in a way to tell us just how invested he is in all of this, which is not. He's over it at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, he's not really being arrested
Right.
by Gaff. He's just sort of his old boss, Bryant, wants to talk to him because, Deckard is sort of retired at this, sort of like retired from it at this point.
Right. But from the outside perspective, it's hard. I learned that when he walked in and he's like, "What do you want, Bryant?" And then I thought, "Oh, he's not under arrest. This is," but first timer, I thought, "Oh God, he brought his noodles. That's hilarious."
Yeah.
And the music. Can we talk about the music?
Oh yeah,
Vangelis wrote the music, but it is so hard to watch it now and not hear a cheesy synthesized sound. It doesn't sound sci-fi futuristic. It sounds like a dude on his Casio to me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No?
Well, I mean, it's maybe it's one of those things where I just love the music of Blade Runner, and I thought it was really done. With Blade Runner 2049, they really kept that synthesizer music going and that feel going. And the music that Vangelis did for Blade Runner was so ethereal and atmospheric and really is a big part. I mean, in the use of saxophones and the use of it's such a like the language you were talking about, the city speak. You understand that this is a language that has sort of come up from the from the city, you know what I mean, from the melting pot that Los Angeles has come, and it's a culmination of a lot of different languages.
Right. But I'm wondering though, you saw this movie in the 80s when that music was timely. That music felt, saxophone and synthesizer were everything. Axel F, that was everything.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm coming at it from 2024, where now it sounds dated. So I'm just wondering if you somehow never saw Blade Runner and you sat down to watch it today for the very first time, if the music would feel as cool and futuristic and perfect as it felt back then.
No, it's an interesting question because I'm a big film score fan. Like, I love film music. I mean, I really do. And actually, when I write, I listen to music that's sort of in the same genre of whatever I'm writing, because I can't listen to stuff with lyrics, when I'm writing. And it is interesting because Blade Runner is one of my favorite scores. It is hard to be that objective in it because I heard it. It's those things like you when you watch something like we said, when you watch something when you're young and it just gets imprinted in your soul, I guess. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's hard to be objective about it.
I mean, for me, it's like St. Elmo's Fire, or I've had the time of my life. I've actually never seen St. Elmo's Fire, but that song was so anthemic and we all loved it and it was moving. But if I played it for my 14-year-old son, he might think it's cheesy and sounds 80s, So, but at the time, I was so proud I knew the words to that.
Oh yeah,
to St. Elmo's Fire theme song.
That's a great song. It's funny because when that comes on my like mix or whatever, when I'm listening to my music, like when I'm outside, I love that Man in Motion. It's a great song. It's got a lot of like
No, I'm
great
talking
energy
about
to it.
the theme. We laughed until we had to cry.
Oh,
That
okay. But the St. Elmo's Fire song, is Man in Motion.
Oh,
Also.
St. Elmo's Fire. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. But I was
I thought
thinking
you
of
were
that
talking about
theme
that
song.
song. Okay.
No, but all of it is so 80s. And, but at the time we just loved it. So, I think it's hard to come at it from today and not find some things dated in the same way that the effects in this movie were flawless. But some of the stuff I'm watching, it's hard not to laugh at what effects looked like 30, 40 years ago.
Yes.
We've just come a long way,
Yeah.
And when
the effects of Blade Runner still hold up really because it's model
gorgeous.
work. Yeah, it's model work. So it's like those typically, especially around that time. I mean, that's the interesting thing is that it was the best effects, and I speak of this coming from putting on my effects cap, because I was I worked in makeup effects for 14 years. Always the best effects in movies are practical effects augmented digitally. That would be the best, because unfortunately a lot of like early digital effects, other than Jurassic Park for some reason, which still looks flawlessly amazing, but
still haven't seen that.
You've never seen Jurassic Park?
This is why I started this
Oh my
podcast, Paul.
God. I'm gonna be sick.
That's a first. I've made my first guest nauseous.
Oh.
Yeah. I have really, truly not. This was not a gimmick. This was like, I sit at dinner parties and go, oh, I've never seen Blade Runner. Oh, I've never seen Jurassic Park. And everyone looks at me like you're looking at me.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
trying it all.
Stunning, but that's great. I think it's wonderful that you're going into it with an open mind and you're
Yeah.
watching, because me as a movie lover, I love every genre. I mean, even though like I'm known as a sci-fi horror guy, I love drama. I have an equally very huge collection of dramas in my vast physical media collection. But my office, I'm sitting here in my office. I can't even imagine not having seen Jurassic Park. I mean, my office is all like action figures and toys and models and creatures and
TARDISes.
TARDISes and books and so forth. So it's hard to imagine that God, my God.
I'm a special lady.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny? Speaking of Jurassic Park, is that I just met this executive I worked on Ultraman like back in the day in '93, and I remember as a shop, we went and all saw Jurassic Park together. And are we allowed to swear in this? Are we allowed to swear? Okay.
Sure.
Because I remember we all went and saw it in the theater, and we were like, oh God, we're fucked. You know what I mean? This is the end of like practical makeup effects. But as we know,
But it has not been.
Yeah, it has not been. And actually, there was sort of a renaissance for it because you couldn't do everything digitally at that point. You know what I mean? It was still expensive. So there was a big renaissance in makeup effects for a number of years. And then digital like sort of took over. And now there's been such not a backlash against digital, but people like Guillermo del Toro, return to the practical elements. And you're now getting that back again. And I think you're getting that nice, that nice mix of it.
Well, I just started Penguin, and holy moly, is that the best makeup I've ever seen?
Oh, I'll tell my friend. He was one of the makeup artists on it, and I'm so proud of him. So proud of him.
Astonishing.
Yeah, it's incredible makeup.
Okay, well, back to Blade Runner.
Sorry, yeah.
That's quite all right. I love your passion. I love your excitement for all of this.
Yeah.
When you saw Blade Runner, it was well before 2019. Let's say it was 85 or something when you were 13 or...
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was probably around 84, like 84, 85.
Did you think, is that what 2019 is going to look like? Did that excite you? Did that scare you? What do you feel seeing such a bleak, bizarre world?
That's funny. No, it never, and I never, I was more concerned about 2001 at that point in my life. So, no, like, it's funny with dystopian, because it is sort of a dystopian future in essence. I was never concerned that our world was going to be like that in 2019. So no, I just sort of accepted it as a potential, as just this dystopian future that was envisioned by Sydney and all these.
I think I would have been really scared.
artists.
If I were a kid and I saw it, I think I would have been genuinely scared. And I actually still don't like dystopian stuff because it scares me to think, what if we end up living, there are no light bulbs. There's apparently no deodorant in the future because everybody's sweating through this whole movie. But I don't like to think of a bleak world like that. So I do tend to avoid dystopian things because I get scared.
Oh, that's interesting. Don't watch 12 Monkeys. Don't watch 12 Monkeys. That's even more bleak as far as. But hey, I wrote the Logan's Run comic book series, and that seems, even though people were getting killed at a certain age, it was like bright future.
I don't know what Logan's Run is, so I believe you.
But
we could do this all day. You could name shit, and I could go no. But so one of the things I admired about the art direction, which is so spectacular, is that it is a dark, bleak, ugly, dark world. And somehow the colors pop and they are so saturated. And I don't know how you achieve this gray blackness, but every time you see a color, it's vibrant and warm. I just thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
No, I mean, it really is. It is one of the most beautifully, even though it's sort of an ugly future, it is one of the most beautifully realized ugly
oh,
futures. That
yes.
landscape, that hell-like landscape of Los Angeles. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with these, it's this retro futurism as well,
Mm-hmm.
where, that's where it's sort of the old city. I mean, the new city is built on top of the remains of the old city,
Mm-hmm.
and it's using the architecture of the olds and combining it with the new, and as you go higher and higher, it gets cleaner and cleaner in some respects.
And some, but they
Yeah.
also, I mean, there's no light. They have
Mm.
electricity, but there's just seemingly no one turns on a light when they enter a
No.
room.
No.
It's really, ooh, it's, it was very dark. Um, and then when they would show city shots, they have billboards like in Times Square. And I
Mhm.
thought the product placement was really interesting because we saw Coca-Cola
Yeah.
has lasted all these years.
Well,
So for Coke to put themselves in the movie, it's like this stamp of approval. Like, we know you're going to be around in 40 years. And then there's Atari, which I
sorry. Yeah.
believe is not around, right?
Yeah. Not like
Atari
that
didn't make
before.
it,
Yeah. I didn't
but
make it.
they put their product in this movie. I just found that really interesting at the time.
Mhm.
You're writing this movie in 1981 or whatever. You're thinking those are two brands that will never die. We're safe putting
Well, at least make
Atari.
it 2019 at least.
Right, right. So I just thought that was an interesting glimpse of, where society was back then and what they imagined it would be in 40 years.
Yeah, but we don't have our flying cars yet, which is a big disappointment.
Yeah, I know. Even
Yeah.
the Jetsons had flying cars. That seems to be a
No.
real swing and a miss on our part.
Yeah.
Speaking of cars, 2 times in this podcast, I have asked my guest, was that the inspiration for the Cybertruck? And both times my guest has said, no, not really. But now we're here. Blade Runner's vehicles
Yeah.
are the actual inspiration for the Cybertruck.
Yeah. I mean, is that true? Did they say that?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Any other
interesting.
questions about nerd culture I can answer for you, Paul?
Well, that's funny. Actually, somebody was comparing it to somebody on Facebook the other day. I don't remember who it was comparing it to the truck from Damnation Alley, which I'm sure is a sci-fi movie you never saw. It was a TV movie
Mhm.
that had um what's his name from the A-Team was in it. With my brain still not working right now.
Mr.
But
T, George
damn,
Papard.
George Papard.
Ah,
Yeah. It was Damnation Alley was like post-apocalyptic, and it had this truck that was then repurposed in a comedy show as Paperboy 2000, and it used to be parked on Cahuenga. It used to be parked on. I
weird.
used to drive by it all the time. It's like, hey, there's Paperboy 2000. The
No,
truck from Damnation
I
Alley.
thought I picked out the Cybertruck in Aliens with an S because that vehicle looked like it. And then I thought I picked it out in a movie I really enjoyed called The Last Starfighter.
Oh, God, yeah. Love the
So
Last
cute, so
Starfighter.
charming. I loved it. And that vehicle looked like the Cybertruck. But if you Google it, it
What?
says Blade
Wait a
Runner.
minute. Wait a minute. What in? Okay, hold on a second. What in the Last Starfighter? Not the
When
gunships in the
no,
Last
when he picks him
Starfighter.
up in the car. When
Oh, yes, that's
Howard
funny. You're right.
Hill,
Oh, yes.
Robert Preston picks him up in the
Robert
car.
Preston. Yeah, Robert Preston's car. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I stand corrected. My apologies.
God, I'm
My apologies.
helping
Yeah.
enlighten you.
Yeah, you
It's a
are.
real role
This is true.
reversal.
This is
So
true.
in this world, I love the details of everything. If it's historical or futuristic, I love to see the practical things people use in their
Man.
daily lives. And the flying cars are certainly futuristic. The guns looked like guns, but then there was like a special bottom part. Was that to kill replicants only? Because I thought,
No,
how evil are replicants if you could just shoot them and they die?
but
They die
that's
quite easily.
yeah, but that's the thing is that the replicants were not designed like they were pleasure models. You know what I mean? Like they were designed as like sort of like the slave labor force. I mean, that
Okay.
was the whole point of them. So it wasn't
Okay.
they but it is funny because we do talk about him as more human than human. But remember, there's this great line, later on when Rutger Hauer's character, is talking. He goes, we're not robots, Sebastian. You know what I mean? We're human. Remember, he's got the two eyes, and he goes, we're flesh and blood, basically. I mean, that's the whole thing is like,
Okay.
they're not robots.
Okay.
That's the thing is like, they're like a biological, they're like some kind of biological species. They never really go too into it. But that's the
they
thing.
only have a lifespan of 4 years, which
Yes.
is why they're trying to. Rutger Hauer is arguing that he wants more life, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's, I mean, those are the deeper issues. Like, I don't want to get too into it because I'll need his Xanax, but the idea of if you knew you only had a 4-year lifespan, it
Yeah.
feels patently unfair. Do we
Yes.
know why they were designed that way?
The same. Well, the sort of the idea is, they would give them like memories and stuff, false memories, just so they could get what they needed from them. They saw them as disposable, individuals. You know what I mean? Like they weren't, because if they have like these long lifespans, then they would obviously want autonomy. Which wasn't the idea. So, from my understanding, and this might be me talking out of my ass a little bit, but it was
Go
really
for
just
it. I don't
keep
know
them,
any better.
just sort of to keep them in control. Like,
Yeah.
if they had that short of a lifespan, then there weren't going to be any issues. You know what I mean?
Okay, great.
It's like they weren't going to get any ideas in their head.
I'll buy it.
And yeah, and then Rachel, the idea of Rachel is that she's like the first that doesn't have this incept date or didn't know how long she was going to live.
Right. Rachel is she is a replicant, but
Yeah.
Harrison Ford falls for her.
Yes.
Yeah. But why is she dressed like Joan Crawford for the first half of the movie? That is such a strange choice.
Well, because
Full-blown Joan Crawford, giant shoulder pads, the big
because we're talking
hair.
about future noir. It's future noir is what
That's
we're
what
doing.
I only got
Yeah.
that like 50 minutes in. Halfway through the movie, I wrote, "Oh, it's a noir.
Oh,
I
yeah.
get it."
Yeah. So it's a noir film. It's a future noir. They call it future noir.
Okay.
So that's really it. It's like they wanted it to sort of have that feel of a film from the 40s or from the 50s.
And that's so smart as well, because then it's a familiar setup, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to hire this private eye to go kill the bad guys. Okay,
Yeah.
I know that setup. Now I can just get the details of the world. And
Now, see here, this begs the thing now is because you've seen the director's cut, correct?
yes,
Okay, so what do you know?
or the final cut, I think it was
The
called.
final cut. Okay, so what do you know about the voice? Because the voiceover only exists in the theatrical
I
version
did.
of the
I
story.
know nothing of you said voiceover, and I nodded like an expert. I actually
Oh,
thought you
okay.
might have meant it was on like the DVD extras or something.
No. So here's the thing, and this is the reason why a lot of people, find fault with Blade Runner or don't like the theatrical cut is because there's a number of instances with voiceover with Rick Deckard, like you would see in a classic noir movie from the 30s or the 40s. And so you've got this narration, like when he meets, when he sees Gaff for the first time, or when he the big one, of course, is when he watches Roy Batty dying at the end, the interesting thing is, see, it's kind of fun talking to somebody who's not seen the theatrical, version first, because it would be really curious to have you watch the theatrical version, and when the voiceover appears in it, to see if you react to it the same. Like if you're like, oh, I didn't get that from this scene, or oh, this adds some, because the whole thing is, look, there's this sort of like misunderstanding a little bit where it's sort of like it was forced on them to do this, right? And Ridley Scott didn't want to do it, and Harrison Ford didn't want to do it. So
The
Harrison
voiceover.
Ford, the voiceover, the
So
narration.
some executive was like, I don't think people are going to get it. You need to
Yes.
narrate it and clue the
Yes.
audience in. Okay.
Yes, and the fact that Harrison Ford phoned it in. You know what I mean? Like he just went in there, he did like the worst version he could of it, and and in the hopes that they would go, all right, yeah, forget about this, not gonna work, take it out.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's lots of like different variations of whether that was the case or not. But to me, I I'm a big fan of the theatrical cut. It's not just because I saw it first;
Uh-huh.
it's because I like that aspect of it. And I
Yeah.
think there's, I know when I watch Blade Runner, even when I watch all the other cuts of it, I'm sort of filling in the blanks of those narrations because they're so ingrained in my head.
Right.
And one of the most important ones is at the end when he's watching, um, when he's watching, Roy Batty die. And what he's saying is he's watching him die and because he's sort of questioning why Roy Batty saved his life.
Mhm.
Because remember, he's
Yeah.
hanging
Yeah.
and he spits in Roy Batty's face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Roy Batty grabs him and
Right.
pulls him up and basically,
Saves his life.
saves his
Right.
life. And the voiceover that we hear as he's watching the use and I'm gonna paraphrase it because unless you want me to find I've got it somewhere in
No,
my
paraphrase
sample.
away.
But basically, he's watching Roy Batty
But
and
do it
he's
in
like,
your Fagin accent.
Lonnie, right? No. He's saying like all I could do is sit there and watch him die. And he's like maybe in what happened here is like in the last moments of Roy Batty's life, like in his life, he realized how important life was, not just his life, but any life. And that's why he saved me. Basically, that's the implication that Deckard's making. You know what I mean? And it's like, all I can do is sit there and watch him die and realize that, this person cared about life so much that he even spared my life. And I was trying
Right.
to kill him. And I think that's very
Yeah.
profound and beautiful.
I would have enjoyed that because I wrote, wait, did Rutger Hauer just die? Is that what his speech meant? Why do I not get the end of this movie? So maybe that voiceover would have clued me in. Because Rutger Hauer, at the end, he just sort of shuts down. And it was a little, he wasn't shot and he didn't fall off the building, right? It was a quiet death. So I was a little confused. So
Yeah,
I
'cause, like,
think I would have been one of those audience members who needed the voiceover.
yeah, here, I'll quote it right here. It's like, here's one of them where he says, maybe in those last moments, he loved life more than he had ever before. Not just his life, anyone's life, my life. And that's very profound. And
Yeah.
I don't know if, when I watch the other cuts of the movie, it's hard for me to say this because I don't know because I've only seen the theatrical cut first and that voiceover is locked in my head. Would I have extrapolated that watching Harrison Ford look at Roy Batty? Because Roy's just giving, that speech about, I've seen sea beans glistening off the, and he's just talking about, if you could see what I've seen with your eyes and so forth, it's all this is lost like tears in rain. I mean, it's like, it's very profound, but I don't know. It's just I don't know if you extrapolate that from it.
I didn't. So
Yeah.
and I'm not I don't run that deep. I really don't. But I didn't go that way. I just was a little perplexed by the end, by why he saved him and why it ended that way. I mean, so okay, I caught what I think is a big continuity error, and I love when I do this. Okay. So when he goes to the strip club, Joanna Cassidy is a stripper. He goes to her dressing room. She's getting dressed. She puts on these killer boots, like thigh-high boots, zips them up, and they have nice heels on them. And then a few minutes later, she is running away from him through the streets in flat boots, no heels.
Yeah, there's issues with that whole scene too.
I got one, though. I got one.
There's issues with that whole scene, and also they actually refilmed for the final cut though. They refilmed moments of that because it's very obvious they were using a male stunt double in the other cuts of the movie. So they actually brought Joanna Whaley back and they actually refilmed some stuff and digitally put her face on and aged her down like in kind of fix that scene a little bit in the final
they
cut.
didn't digitally put the heels on the boots.
Yeah.
So I'm sending a strongly worded letter about it. Okay. So then I hit the halfway point and I looked at the clock and I thought, oh God, I have to make dinner. I have to pause the movie.
Ooh.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And the movie was it's so heavy. It's not a light, funny movie. It was dark and heavy. And I thought, I like to turn on the kitchen TV when I cook. That's my happy place. So I turned on the Who Killed John Benet Ramsey thing as a
Yeah.
palate cleanser.
Oh, great. Yeah, that sounds
Just
like a
as a
great
little
one.
light, frothy, something to tide me over. But it's so strange that I can watch true crime. It's a very mainstream thing. I love all the podcasts. I read a lot of the books and the documentaries. I love it all. That doesn't scare me. But when you say the whole world will have blown up and there will be no light and people will just be killing each other on the streets all day, that gets me anxious.
Okay, but here's something really funny. Sorry to interrupt you, but if you had watched the theatrical cut, so your version of the movie ends with them getting into the elevator and the door shuts, and then okay. In the theatrical cut, you cut to them in a car driving out into this forest area that's nice and like foresty and beautiful, and basically he has he's like, I don't know how long she, like, I'm paraphrasing again, but it's like, I don't know how long she had, he had never told me how long she had, so you know
Right. Let's
who
make the
knows?
most of it.
Yeah,
Right.
let's make the most of it. You know what I mean? And he's sitting there and he's driving with
It's like Danny and Sandy at the end of Grease. They
yeah,
fly off
exactly.
in the car.
Exactly. Now, a lot of
Yeah.
people go really mental with that. And here's something interesting. A lot of people go mental with that. Like, well, wait a minute. If the world isn't all like, Los Angeles, why is everybody living in Los Angeles? And why is this like, there's just nice green areas that you can go to? Because they used outtakes from The Shining, from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
You're
They
kidding.
yeah, that's what they
For the
used
green
for the end.
trees?
For the end of Blade Runner, they used it's footage, because remember at the beginning of The Shining, it's like footage that's showing the landscape and stuff like that. So they used that for the end of Blade Runner. They have shots of him in the car, but then you cut to
Wow.
that, and then the credits are like over that. Now it's an interesting thing because people go like, well, wait a minute, why are people living in Los Angeles if they could just like live out in this area? Like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, for the same reason they do it in the year 2024. You know what I mean? It's like there are plenty of crappy cities, around the world that people live in, you know what I mean, and never move from. And it's so I never found that as a very compelling argument against that ending. But it just shows like they basically leave the city. I mean, that's the whole idea, is they leave the city for
Well,
an unknown
it would
future.
end on a note of hope, but also just it's all utterly sad that she could have one day left. She could have 3.5 years left. We don't know. It's sad. Now, did you read the book?
You know what? I have. I've read it's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's so different from it's so different. You know what I mean? Like from it, that I don't really connect with it too much. I mean, I'm not. It's funny because I'm big fan of science fiction. I'm a big Stanislaw Lem fan. Big Kurt Vonnegut fan. Big Asimov and Bradbury and stuff like that. But I not if it's so funny. I'm not a really big fan of the novel. I'm not.
Okay. Now, this I did a little reading after I watched it. This movie was not instantly beloved.
Oh God, no, it did not do well at all.
Right.
At all. Yeah.
And it mixed reviews, and then it gained a cult following, which I'm learning a lot of the stuff I'm talking about took a while for everyone to catch on and fall in love with it.
Yeah. It's like the same trajectory with like John Carpenter's The Thing. When that came out, it was like that movie did not do well. And, because E.T. had just come out recently and, people were like, aliens are good. And it just wasn't what people wanted, and they wanted the good feel they got from E.T. So,
Well, this came
yeah.
out the same year as E.T. as well.
Yes. Yep. 82. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I do think that's so interesting when something doesn't immediately catch fire or spark a universal positivity. And then over years, it's become just this legendary cult classic. I mean,
So you're telling me there is hope for Madam Web and Craven the Hunter?
oh boy, I plead the fifth. Okay, so one character we have not talked about that I was freaked out by his world is Sebastian, the guy who created the replicants, right? Now, his world was so bizarre for bizarre's sake to me, with the little creatures he made as his friends and all of the dolls that some of them came to life. And it was so twisted and creepy. Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. You're trying to give me nightmares. Um, I didn't quite understand that. Was that just to signify he's a madman who invents these mad things? Why was it so? His world was so bananas, and he was living in solitude. It was, I don't know.
Well,
If I
yeah,
saw that at 12, I would have run
yeah.
screaming, so scared.
Well, J.S. Sebastian, like he's such an interesting character because he's sort of very stunted because he has a disease, right? Like that's why he couldn't go off world and so forth. So he was sort of like stuck living here, and he helped design and create the replicants for Tyrell, for the Tyrell company, and a bit of a mad genius, and sort of like lives with the remnants of like the different toys, and the way it's sort of like it gives him a very childlike, air to him too. Do you know what I mean? And the way he like sort of sees the world and so forth, and the way they're able to manipulate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, especially if Pris is able to sort of manipulate with that because he's clearly a very, uncultured and very like,
Childlike.
childlike individual. So, looking like he just runs for his life when Batty kills Tyrell. You know what I mean?
When Batty kills Tyrell, is that the
Yeah.
eyeballs one?
Yeah.
Oh, that was hard to watch. I might have turned away. He sticks his,
Yeah, but it's such an interesting, moment too, where, about meeting one's creator, you know what I mean? And wanting what Roy Batty wanted. I mean, this thing that I love about, and no, one of the things I love about Blade Runner, and I always like distill this down for people. You know what I mean? Like you get this reductive, you can get this reductive with it. It is about robots that just want to be human being hunted down by a human that has to act almost like a robot in order to do his job.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
like you
that's
get this
beautiful.
working at cross purposes. You know what I mean? And it's like, and even though Roy Batty and the replicants are doing things that are obviously, they're murdering people and so forth, it's not really what their agenda is. You know what I mean? They want to live. I mean, that's the whole point, is they want to live and feel really just, abandoned. They feel abandoned by society, and they feel abandoned by their creator. And what would that do to you? You know what I mean? Like, what would that do to you? And that desire to live. And it's such a beautiful theme, and it's such an interesting theme because look, this movie could have just been, like a Terminator type movie where Rick Deckard's our good guy and he's hunting down these crazy robots trying to kill people. You know what I mean? And that could have worked as a interesting science fiction, action movie. But that's not what this movie is. It's really asking these questions, and there's no easy answers. And I think that is because look. Here's the big thing. The big real difference between the theatrical cut and the other cuts of Blade Runner is that the other cuts of Blade Runner really suggest that Deckard might be a replicant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of the unicorn dream, which isn't in the theatrical cut. You know what I mean? So,
Okay.
the unicorn, the origami unicorn is still in there, but I see. I always felt it represented something else, not the dream. Not that Gaff knows his dream, therefore Rick Deckard, you're a replicant. But that's what they're trying to suggest, that Deckard is a replicant.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, that he's got implanted memories, and what's the best way to you'd send after a replicant to kill replicants. You know what I mean? But there's so much, and it's funny because I wrote an essay for this book on Blade Runner where I argue why I feel the theatrical version is the truest version, and I really argue against the fact that Deckard should be a replicant, because to me it destroys that theme of which we just talked about
humanity wrestling with these ideas.
Wrestling with these ideas. So if Deckard the replicant, it's sort of, I think destroys that, because it's this idea that he's having this epiphany, and he's having this sort of moment in time where he's recognizing that he's been killing sentient beings that just want to live. And his ability, and Deckard has turned himself into this almost like cold, almost robotic, like he's become like a robot in some respects, with his emotions, and he's able to have feelings for his enemy, for lack of a better word, with Rachel, and legitimately fall in love with her.
But I like a movie that can cause years and years of debate amongst its fans, whether or not he's a replicant, and that, you can find points in the movie to support your stance, and the opponent can find those points to support their stance. And I think that's very cool and very, it does set this movie apart from an action flick. It's really not a lot of action. It's more thought-provoking and it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, and I really love that, and I hope you'll watch Blade Runner 2049, which is wonderful. Like, it really, Denis Villeneuve did such an amazing job with it, and I was so terrified to watch that movie, because I was like, oh, please don't take a shit on my, like my favorite, and I really love it. And one of the great things about 2049 is, because Deckard appears in the movie, he is in the movie, and he's a character in the movie, they still don't answer the question whether
if he's
Deckard,
a replicant.
Yeah, he's a replicant or not. And there's a great moment in the film, and this isn't ruining anything for anybody, okay? There's a great moment where, there's this Agent K, who's, tracks Deckard down, you know what I mean? Like, and Deckard is like pouring himself a drink, and he pours some of the drink on the ground, and a dog comes over and licks it up. And it's basically suggested, is that a real dog or not? Is that, because we don't really have like real animals. And Deckard's reaction to it, like, he said, is that a real dog? And he goes, does it matter? And that's his reply. Deckard's response to it is, does it matter? You know what I mean? It's like, if you think it's a real dog, then I guess it's a real dog. Does it behave like a real dog? Then I guess it's a real dog. Does it really matter? And I think that's really a wonderful theme that really extends beyond 2049 into, the first film as well. It's like, if you accept these people as human beings, then they're human beings. You know what I mean?
God, this shit got deep.
Well, that's what's so wonderful. But that's what's so wonderful about that movie. That's why it's always been my favorite movie of all time. It always has been.
Thank you for sharing it with me. I never would have tried it if not for this podcast, and if not for my friends saying, this is what I want to talk about. And I wouldn't appreciate it without all of your insights and thoughts about it. So you made it more meaningful and more of a great experience for me. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you believe?
Check it out. Like, one last thing on my last word on it is, like, I hope at some point you'll revisit it, but revisit the theatrical cut. And I hope you'll watch 2049. And then, there's a new TV series with Michelle Yeoh coming out that they're working on right now.
Ooh, I love her so much.
Yeah. There's a new Blade Runner TV series that's coming out, I think, this year.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, I am going to tell everybody my business, and then I want you to tell everybody where they can find you and your work. And then for members only, we're going to do an extra few minutes. Paul is going to explain the world of the Saturn Awards to me, which is the sci-fi organization's awards for all of these genre films. And I know nothing about it, and he's a producer on it, so he's going to share all that. All right. So, Make Me a Nerd is a production of True Story FM, engineering by the peerless Pete Wright. My theme song is Wonderstruck by Jane and the Boy. If you want to reach out to me on social media, it's Instagram at Mandy_Kaplan_Clavens, both with Ks. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please stop, write a review, leave a 5-star review, and share your thoughts. That way, it helps everyone get more eyes on this podcast. And if you're feeling extra supportive, go to makemeanerd.com and click that join button. It'll get you your episodes ad-free and early, and access to bonus content like interviews with Paul Salamoff. Paul, where can the world find you and your work?
Well, I'm always on Facebook. If you want to be my friend, I'm happy to be your friend. But I have a website you can check out if you want to check out all the stuff I've worked. It's 35 years I've been in the industry, and I've worked as, makeup effects artist, a producer, writer. I've worked in video games. I've worked in comic books and written novels and nonfiction stuff. So you can go to my website, which is just pauljsalamoff.com. So good luck spelling that. I hope Mandy will put that in the
show notes.
Show notes. But also, if you want to just check out some of my stuff, please check out my film Encounter with Luke Hemsworth. Like I said, it won the Saturn Award for Best Independent Film among a bunch of other awards.
I saw it in the movie theater.
Yes, yeah.
Very
has a lot
exciting.
of very thoughtful science fiction, and also you can check out some of my graphic novels. My new graphic novel, Hired Guns, just came out recently, and also I wrote this series called Discord and Tales of Discord, as well as the Logan's Run series, and I have a book. If you're really interested in the film industry, I wrote a book that's used in film schools around the world called On the Set, The Hidden Rules of Movie Making Etiquette. That it's in its 4th edition. And it features like over 90 industry professionals that like James Gunn and Wes Craven. And I mean,
Is that all?
You name it.
Paul?
And I guess that's all.
That's
for
all
right
you've
now.
been up to?
That's all it's been up to.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. You're lazy.
Sorry.
And
I'll
not
be better.
creative
I'll
and
be better.
untalented. I think I've said it all. Thank you so much for doing this. What a treat to reunite with you in this capacity. You're so wonderful. And you're going to stick around. And if you guys want to hear more of Paul's passion and expertise, please go to makemeanerd.com/join. I think that's right. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks for having me.